Hello, my name's Kathy Bissell. Welcome to the Golf Show 2.0. We've asked a guest to come back for a second shot at us, Hughes Norton, who has a wonderful book called Rainmaker, which is about all of his experiences at IMG, where he was the super agent for Tiger Woods. Gary, we've got questions. You go first.
Well, who is this Tiger Woods fellow, and will he ever amount to anything, Hughes?
Sadly, Gary, I don't know how you feel about this, but I hate to see anyone's legacy sort of tarnished. And we have the recency factor in all of our brains.
Yes.
That most just clearly or distinctly remember the latest stuff. And based on he's obviously struggling. He's 3 months away from being 49. He's had all these surgeries that we know about. He can barely walk. He's had another micro disc, whatever the thing is, a month or so ago. I think there's some stat, you probably know this, Gary, since February 23, I think Tiger's shot one round under par. And he hasn't played many. I think he had 12 rounds last year or something. But, there's so much greatness there.
Yeah.
And I want to remember that. I don't want to, and it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that Jack recognized a little faster that it was time to exit the stage and be on the Swilken Bridge at St. Andrews and wave goodbye. I was hoping Tiger would do that at the Open at St. Andrews recently, but he's, I know better than anybody. There's one thing he is, it's stubborn.
Well, the difference is Jack was still competitive. At 58, he made a run at the Masters, and he didn't have the injuries. He's a lot older and had a lot longer time to realize, oh, I'm too old. And Tiger, he's just coming off a Masters win 5 years ago, and he's not competitive because his body's broken. And it's, when you're an athlete, you always think you can get back in shape and you can practice. And every time Tiger takes one step forward, he takes two steps back because something else goes wrong with his body. So I think I think he's still trying to figure out what do I have, but in the process of that, something else, the brakes go out, the tire goes flat. It's always something with him. And it is a shame because he is the greatest player of the modern era, no doubt.
Interestingly, I say this in the book, he's now 15 months away from the senior tour.
Yeah.
And everybody that plays with him down in Florida, on off times and stuff, keeps saying, oh, he can hit all the shots. It's just the walking kills him and all that stuff. And he's the most competitive person I ever met, for sure. And I promise you, he will not only attack the senior tour with vigor and enthusiasm. He's liable to win. He's liable to win 10 or 12 times a year out there. And believe me, when I tell you, in his mind, he's already thinking Hale and Bernhard Langer, whatever, 46, 40, the number of tournaments they won. He's looking for 50 and beyond, and don't bet against him.
Wow. Well, if he can ride a cart every time.
Yep, that's the beauty of it.
It keeps him out of the fray. He can ride a cart, so he doesn't have to walk. And
he's liable to shoot unbelievable scores out there. And he lives for competition. He's the most competitive person of all time. And really, that's all that's in his life. He's on the boards and the committees of all this stuff with the tour and doing this indoor golf, which frankly, we can get into it. I think that's goofy, but that's all sort of side noise. He lives to compete and beat your brains out. And that's he can't get to the senior tour fast enough, in my opinion.
Well, he's also got a difference on the senior tour besides the carts is you've also got to play at least one pro-am, and some tournaments those guys got to play two pro-am. So I think the big question is, can his body withstand how many rounds of playing golf, how many days in a row? I mean, you saw at the Masters where he made it to Sunday, but boy, he just barely got around Sunday. And he was playing with Neil Shipley, the amateur, and I almost felt like he showed up Sunday because maybe he felt he owed it to Neil Shipley, a big and I didn't think he was going to make it around. So, but again, he walked in, wasn't riding a cart, but
Yeah.
I just hope he doesn't hurt something beyond repair that, affects his day-to-day living.
Agreed.
Oh,
And that's the point. That's the point. That weekend, remember, 82 Saturday, 77 Sunday. That's the point where I thought to myself, even for Tiger, the writing's got to be on the wall. We all saw, and you referenced it, Gary, other athletes, Willie Mays, I'm old enough to remember that. He hung around too long. You want to quit at the top. But come on, if you're averaging 80 at Augusta, maybe it's time to
It's not going to get you very far.
hang them up.
You want to be Jim Brown and quit during the filming of the during the Dirty Dozen and not go back to football. And
I almost mentioned Jim Brown, age 29, said, see you later. That's the way to, or Bjorn Borg, age 26, retired.
Yes. He retired early. I saw a tennis special couple months ago about that era with Borg and Connors and McEnroe and Chris Everett and Martina, and it was just interesting because I lived through it.
Yep, with the wood rackets, which nobody can believe. But just think, if you're Bjorn Borg, I mean, I never could wrap my mind around this. You retire at 26, one of the greats of your sport. What do you do for the next 50 years? It's crazy.
Well, maybe he had an idea of what he wanted to do, and I don't know what he's doing, so I didn't follow him, haven't paid attention. But
He was an IMG client. Actually, he sunk a bunch of money against our guidance and recommendations into a clothing company with a Swedish entrepreneur, and lost his butt.
Ooh.
But kind of got out of that and has gone on, and it is fun to see him interviewed. He doesn't, the face is aged, but it's still Bjorn, in that documentary you saw.
Yeah. Yeah.
And tennis is not an old man's game. Once you're out, once you're done, you are done.
Although Djokovic is putting the lie to that, isn't he?
Well, that's true. Look,
they retire and come back and retire and come back.
That's right. Yep. Hughes, you were kind of in hibernation for 20 some years. You do this book, which I would vote it book of the most important book of the year in golf. You had to have gotten some reaction from a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of people you hadn't heard from in some time. Tell us some of the most notable. Oh, here's the plug. There's the book.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. Just hold that up, Kathy, but make sure we can see your face, because it's really
good feedback you got.
You'll get me back in a minute. The whole thing.
Yeah, people kind of came out of the woodwork. A bunch of people, like you're referring to, say, where the hell have you been? What took you so long? These stories, we would have liked to hear these 15 years ago instead of making us wait, that type of thing. Heard from some great people. Sean McManus, who you guys know, is just retired as the head of CBS Sports, actually ran CBS News and CBS Sports for about 6 or 7 years. Can you imagine that job?
Yeah.
Wonderful guy. He was at IMG. He was at IMG with me. He actually was Jim Nance's broadcast agent when Jim, was a client of IMG. And a few years go by, and all of a sudden he's Jim's boss at CBS. How the world turns, right? But people like Sean, just so happy to read the book. Happy for me just to tell the story. Forget it. Don't, commercial success notwithstanding, whatever. And Jerry Pate, out of the blue, I got a phone call the other night. Hey, Hughes, Jerry, Susie and I are in Cleveland. She's having a little minor surgery at the Cleveland Clinic. Let's get together. Loved your book. That kind of stuff. Yeah. And we had a great time. That the people from IMG that I hadn't spoken to for years, lots of people around the world that I'd sort of worked with over the years, but we're very happy. And the IMG execs who said, "Man, you nailed McCormick." And the best one in that regard, Mark had 3 children with his first wife, Nancy, and Leslie, who's the youngest, his daughter, was in town about a year or so ago, and came to visit her mom. Her mom, Nancy, is at a senior living place about 3 miles up the road from me, and said, "Hey, let's have a coffee." And I was very nervous because I sat down with Leslie and said, "Look, I've just written a book. You haven't heard about it probably because it just came out. It was in March. And I know that I didn't know what to do because I wanted to tell you and Todd and Breck that I was doing it, but I was so afraid that if I told you, you'd say, don't do it. Because they've rebuffed actually a number of approaches about writing the history of IMG and writing about their dad. And I gave Leslie a copy of the book, and I gave her, which I had signed, and I gave her another one for her mom. And off they went. They both came back and said, we love this. Leslie sent me a picture of Nancy, 94 years old. She's sitting in a chair. I wish I could show it to you, holding the book. And Leslie's caption was, my mom hasn't read any book, Hughes, for about 3 years. But of course, she was part of IMG and all the stuff we traced with Mark from the early days. That made me feel really good. So it ran the gamut from hearing from people, and they were all pretty much. I didn't really hear from anybody. And this is, I'll tell you this story. I thought I would hear from some people. The way that Max Elbin at Golf Digest, I don't know if I shared this with you guys first time around. We submitted the manuscript to Golf Digest because they wanted to do an excerpt of the book, which they did run in March. I think it was 6 pages, one of the longest ones they've done in a while. And Max read it, came back and said, great stuff, Hughes. I just have one question. In what order do you think you will hear from the following 3 people? Mark O'Meara, Alistair Johnston, and Phil Knight. And knock on wood, I haven't heard from any of them. I've heard indirectly. Actually, surprisingly, O'Meara apparently told, this is hearsay, secondhand, he was glad that Hughes finally told his story, despite what I felt was his sort of, interference in my relationship with Tiger. And Alistair Johnson, who's around town here, was clearly not happy with it. And Phil Knight, I suspect, is too busy with Nike's stock price going down 20% and revenues not hitting targets the last 12 months that I don't think he has time to worry about the excerpt with him. I haven't heard from any of them.
I'll tell you what, O'Meara was probably happy that you let him off as easy as you did. You could have taken him down a lot harder had you wanted to.
I won't reveal the source, but a player who was a client of mine for many years and who's in the book said to me when he first got the manuscript, loved it, Hughes. All the stuff in there is true. One complaint, you weren't hard enough on O'Meara.
Oh,
yeah.
This is a fellow player. So,
well, you said something earlier that struck me, regardless, I was going to ask you how the book did, but I know you didn't do the book to make money. You did the book to tell the tale and get it off your chest. And there had to be a sense of relief once it came out. And really, you had to be pretty pleased that nobody did get angry, that everybody was happy. I mean, it's got to be invigorating, really, to get the kind of reception the book got.
For sure, Gary, that's definitely true. And one of the amazing things that happened over and over again from people multiple times was, Hughes, loved the story, great stuff. But one question, why were you so hard on yourself? That came up over and over and over again. And I thought, wow, I never intended to be. I swore with George Pepper from the beginning that we had to be honest and authentic, and we got to write the screw ups by the super agent as well as the tremendous successes, because it's got to be real. I mean, what's the point of the other way to go would have been look at all the great stuff I did for the 2 best players of the last 40 years, Norman and Tiger, and these bastards screwed me. I mean, nobody wants to really read that, right? You could make a case for that, and maybe I did in a way. But the number of people that said, wow, you accomplished so many great things and you tore yourself down. You're so hard on yourself.
I agree with that statement. I thought you were really hard on yourself. But we'd like to be hard on some other people.
Yeah, well, Tiger said second place sucks because he's so driven. And, gee, why were you the best agent? Same deal.
Same deal.
You were driven. And so if it wasn't perfect, you weren't satisfied. And that's why you were successful.
But I was always, Gary and Kathy, I think foremost in my mind was that these guys and girls had hired me for a very important function in their life. And therefore, I owed it to them to be a fierce advocate. I mean, really fight for them in
That was
every
your
possible
job.
situation. And that isn't popular with a lot of people. Some of the people I negotiated with, some of the other players. And I thought there'd be more sort of recrimination coming back to me, directly or indirectly, like, this son of a bitch finally got his comeuppance, or whatever. But it's been amazing. I'm blessed in that way.
Well,
Well,
let's move on to a couple of questions we wanted to ask you about. One is the TGL, and the other is Live. And because
Yes.
you were Greg Norman's agent, we wanted to know what you think about Greg and that whole situation. I mean, he tried 2 times before to get a separate league off the ground before he found money from the Saudis to do it. What
Yep.
do you recall about his first 2 efforts?
Well, and one of the major revelations in the book is that the so-called Greg Norman idea of a world tour was not Greg Norman's idea at all. It was the idea of a guy named Mark McCormick, who invented the sports management business. And we quote the passage from Mark's book in 1967, where he says, I came to the conclusion finally that the best thing for professional golf would be to have a smaller tour with just the stars, because fans want to see the best players compete against each other more often. We could go around the world, and which wasn't done much in those days. And he had lined up, a TV network and some sponsors, and went to Arnold with it. And Arnold famously said, "Mark, we can't do this. It'll kill the other guys on the tour." That was 67. Fast forward 1994. In the years that I represented Greg, from 82 to 93, this came up. We spend unbelievable number of hours together, and we're on planes to Australia and stuff like that. And so, hey, Greg, did you ever hear about this idea of Mark's that Arnold shot down? No, tell me more about it. So laid it all out to him in detail. Didn't think anything of it. 1994, he proposes this with John Montgomery. Gary, you'll remember John and John Sr. and Jr., who were tournament organizers and promoters. And they pitched the whole thing to the PGA Tour players, who at the time were playing the Shark Shootout, the tournament that Greg, that really I kind of invented for him to be, the head of. So Greg makes his pitch to the PGA Tour, and all the top players at the time, Faldo, all of them, were sitting in the room, as well as Arnold, because Arnold was an invitee, special invitee to this limited field Shark Shootout. So he goes through this pitch. Greg says, "Okay, I'd be interested in your reaction." There's a pause. Arnold, first guy up, stands up, says, "Greg, how many times do you think Jack and Gary and I were approached with this same idea over the years?" He said, "It didn't work then. We shot it down, and it's not going to work this time for me. You guys do whatever else you want to do in this room today, but I'm never going to support something because it'll be bad for the fellas." That's the way Arnold called it, phrased it, "for the fellas," meaning the rest of the guys on the tour.
Yeah.
And he walked out of the room. That was 1994 in Thousand Oaks, California. End of the World Tour. Greg really never got over that, in my opinion. He had left me and IMG at that point.
Yeah.
But he is famous for holding grudges. I saw this all during the time I was with him, whether it was former caddies or someone that had wronged him in some way, and he always took it personally and sort of felt, I'm gonna get back at you. So, here comes the Saudis trying to get into golf. They're rebuffed by Jay Monahan and the PGA Tour, and they think, okay, well, we'll just go do our own tour. Now, who can we get as a front man? I mean, you couldn't script it any better. The guy holds a grudge against the PGA Tour. He has sort of an obsessive need, and we talk about this in the book, to be visible and relevant. All of his career, he's just needed that, something inside of him. Bingo, here we go. And he didn't care what the slings and arrows were, or what the vitriol or the anger. He was happy to front it, and of course say it was his idea again.
Is it possible at all that at the time maybe his finances weren't great and he needed something like this? Or is that, because that was something I heard third hand. I don't know if it was true at all, but I'm trying to think, he sold out. He's not at that, he didn't have that clothing line anymore. So I don't know what he's got in his quote empire.
very good point. He's probably got 50 million already from the Saudis, or maybe more, the way they throw on money for serving in this role. But you're dead on, Gary. His outside stuff, course design kind of died off a little bit. He was very big into that. Some of his courses had to be redone because people didn't like them. I suppose that happens to every architect. He had a wine, a celebrity wine company, but those are kind of a dime a dozen. I don't have the financials, but maybe it did okay. But the biggest and saddest one was a deal that I was instrumental in is Reebok with that fabulous multicolor shark logo.
Yes.
Which is one of the great logos, and you could adapt it to any color garment because the famous story we found this artist in Massachusetts because Reebok was up that way, and he did that design, came up with it for $5,000 flat fee.
Wow.
This is in the 80s, so I always felt a little guilty about that. But that brand, Gary, you referenced it. It literally is in bargain basement shops now. The Reebok Shark, you don't see anybody wearing it, and it's like $19.99 for a polo shirt. It's sad, really. So maybe that played into it. But I think he was okay financially, if not better than that. I think it was this need to be visible and relevant, and this feeling I can finally settle this grudge and get back at the PGA Tour for shafting me.
Well, he certainly had a need to get back at somebody to go that far.
And you saw in the last couple of days, he's, not to interrupt, but he's he came out and said, my contract goes through the end of next year. I plan on being around a long time. Meanwhile, everybody on the PGA Tour says if we're ever going to have a reprogramment with Liv, the first condition is Greg's got, and that's straight from Rory and Tiger, who can't stand him. So
yeah.
And so I wonder if the tour is going to just wait him out till the end of August and then see what happens.
But I suspect, as I mentioned earlier, 50 million may be light. The way the Saudis spend money, maybe he got 50 million a year. Who knows?
Is there any way out of this Live thing? Is there any? I don't see why the PGA Tour would want to compromise other than 3 or 4 players. Live doesn't really offer anything they want or need. The only thing they need is for Live to go away, so maybe they can reduce their purses, because I think they've now reached unsustainable levels. But I don't see the need to compromise, and I don't know why they would. But is there this framework agreement? What are they going to do about that? Any suggestions for them?
I couldn't agree more, and I want to refer everybody watching this podcast, the millions who tune in regularly,
yes,
to look up Van Sickle's. And this is the email that I sent you. It's about 4 paragraphs, and it was a blurb in your most recent dispatch called "The Cold War Prediction." It is on the money totally, in which you basically said, let's be honest, DeChambeau and maybe Koepka, who else moves the needle on the Live Tour? I couldn't agree more. They don't have any important tournaments. The team competition hasn't caught on. It's on the money. It's how I would have answered this question, guys, had I not just seen this the other day. And that's why I sent you the email, Gary. There's been so much waffling about what's going to happen. It's totally right on. I think for most fans, for me, of golf, the Live Tour is irrelevant.
Yeah.
I think if they take another 5 players, and sadly there aren't 2 more that really move the needle anymore. I don't think it matters. Where it matters to me, and I'd be interested in what you guys think, is, okay, Live happens to fight it off and keep more people from defecting.
Yes.
The tour, Monahan, does these 8 special events, increased prize money, gives everybody more money over here. Meanwhile, the number of stars who play the run-of-the-mill tour events is depleted, because now these guys are playing 8 plus the 4 majors plus whatever. They don't want to play more than 15. You know the song and dance. So now those sponsors are being asked to pay more for less. And what have we lost? We've lost Honda. We've lost Farmers Insurance. We lost Wells Fargo. RBC apparently is hanging by a thread, and they have 2 events, Heritage in Canada.
Shriners is out in Las Vegas.
Shriners, one of the fall circuit. And I mean, and they quickly replaced Wells Fargo with something called Truist. I guess
Yes.
it's a bank, but
Yes.
nevertheless, I that's where I think the tour is really vulnerable because in while keeping its players happy with more money so they wouldn't go to live, they've kind of created a monster with
Yeah.
the other events. And I don't know how, if the run of the mill event is 15 million, I don't know what you've heard, Gary, that I think these elevated events want 30 million from the title sponsor.
Well, this is just what they did with World Golf Championships, where they mandated a field by getting the top players, and there's 4 tournaments that these guys have to play, and that means there's 4 regular tournaments they're not going to play. They stole. It's like coming up with a new version of Diet Coke. You just steal your Diet Coke customers. You don't gain, you lose. And if the tour wants to shrink down to, I mean, they're going to turn into Greg Norman's World Tour.
Yep.
Only it's going to be in the U.S. Less is not more. It's always less. I don't care what anybody says.
Always
Yeah,
less.
and if you're eligible for these 8 events with no cut and huge prize money rivaling live, right? 4 million for first. And you got the 4 majors. Now everybody plays the Scottish Open right before the Open Championship. So that's 5. So that's 13. You maybe, and guys like Rory, not so much the Americans, but he likes to play some global events. You're basically reducing the pool of top players who are available for pick a tournament.
The Greater Milwaukee Open.
Well,
Milwaukee,
Valspar and
Fort Worth,
Colonial, John Deere, all of them, 3M.
But I couldn't agree with you more. Back to live for a second, and everybody's been talking about this. I'm not sure we know what the extent of the Department of Justice investigation into this merger, quote unquote merger, is. Apparently, it's pretty strong.
Okay,
and that's hanging over everybody. And I think that's maybe why. And I think one of the things the Department of Justice wanted, if I'm not mistaken, was a full disclosure kind of reveal from the Saudis of all kinds of stuff that as a sovereign nation, they're not interested in sharing with anybody.
Right.
So that's number one. And number two, as Rory pointed out the other day, half the damn players on the tour are against anybody getting together because some of them can't get over the fact that these 6 or 7 stars and some others, took the money and ran. So
I wonder if Live is a tour that would be successful or more successful as a non-US tour if they just played all their events in Asia or Europe and Australia, where they do draw some good crowds in some places.
They do.
Keep trying to go up, play in the US and try to go up against some tour events, and they can't get it. They can't get noticed. Maybe if they stayed overseas, they might do a little bit better.
And on that note, how about this? The fall series, I know it's the journeyman of the tour, the lesser players, that's important to them, these events that are going on right now. Cut the thing off in the US after the end of the FedEx Cup. Let's, as you say, have Liv do all these global events. They can go to some great cities, some great golf courses, and let's let PGA Tour members who now are off totally because they're off months have the ability to go play a few live events in a separate tour and let the two exist side by side.
I'll tell you the problem with that. It's called things like Mark Rolfing's original tournament at Kapalua, the Skins game, the J.C. Penney. You get 3 months of people trying to invent their own version of golf and other events, and utilizing PGA Tour players and Champions Tour players to do that. And that gets to be a conflict for the tour.
Well, they have to be the merger, the framework agreement, where they say, all right, our fall season is now the Live Tour.
I see. Okay.
I think that's what Hughes meant, right?
Yeah, of course, that would open up, more people would want to play than their current field size, so they might have to expand it.
Yeah.
But there's got to be a way out of this for what McCormick, people say to me, what would McCormick do or what would he have done? I knew him so well. He would have said, get His Excellency and Monahan and bring Jimmy Dunn and some intelligent people back into the room and don't let them out until there's a way to get this. And Mark's position would be, if somebody's coming with $1 billion to invest in my enterprise, I really don't want to piss them off and be arrogant and throw them out of the room. Let's find a way. There's a way, but boy, it's hardened into as you refer to, Gary, in this little bit. I mean, it's I don't know. Rory, I think, said the other day, he thinks it's another 2 years before they get anywhere.
My son likes to say, if the waitress asks you if you want a free second helping of ice cream, you say yes, even if you don't want it.
What's so hard?
$1 million and wants to put it, you say yes.
Totally. But there was that arrogance there with the tour. I mean,
oh yeah.
Let's be honest. It was the only game in town for decades. Yes. They were very arrogant. We don't need this competition. Who are these people? Saudis don't know anything about golf. Get lost. I mean, wow.
Well, and before we go, one more thing. Tiger's new deal with the simulator golf.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on that, or have you heard?
I sure do, and I could be dead wrong. Count me out. I don't understand at all. We had the Masters TV ratings down 20%. The Players Championship TV was down 17%. Was it CBS or NBC? I forget which network. And all their golf events was down 15 to 17%. Everything is fans are getting turned off, and simultaneously, of course, we have more and more people playing golf. So maybe they're all going out to play on Saturday and Sunday afternoon instead of watching this circus. So now we're going to have a simulator with teams of, I mean, I don't, I have no interest in watching it, and I'll probably be dead wrong. And, what may help Tiger, that'll make people tune in, and it's not the Golf Channel, it's ESPN. So more people, and the promotions there that they're going to run will get people maybe to sample. Will they stay? I mean, do I want to hear Max Homa and somebody else talking about how to hit this 3/4 6-iron into a screen? I don't get it. Gary, help me.
It's Tiger, so people care. But the other thing, ratings are down. But ratings of all TV shows people aren't watching TV. They're watching the internet more than TV. And the new stars and Hollywood's shaking because Hollywood isn't Hollywood. The internet blown up everything. So maybe this is the future. And as you said earlier, there's 3 dinosaurs. What do we know?
And well, you're younger, so you don't count as a dinosaur.
No, I'm not younger.
The other thing is, everybody's younger than me. Stop. The other thing that there's this surge of Topgolf and everybody wanting to play the indoor stuff, and that's part of the appeal of McClary, the guy who invented this. But Topgolf sales and revenue and customer count is off for the last 4 quarters. So maybe the bloom is off that rose. Maybe people
They are, which you may or may not remember, I do some real estate. They are trying to sell the leases or sell the facilities. I didn't investigate it closely enough, of several of their Topgolf operations. I saw them on several of them. I like 5, 6, 7 of the Topgolf sites on the commercial real estate website. And I went, what is it? They're selling them. So
I also saw that Callaway is seriously thinking about spinning the whole thing off and just.
Oh, they might, yeah.
Well,
they probably not doing
sites, they got to build these gigantic nets. They got a 3 or 4 story. That's a big facility. I mean, that's got to be 3, 4, 5 million to build.
It's millions.
Simulator golf.
Yep.
You can do it in a tent. Simulators got a much better future.
Yep.
But they're even overpriced. So simulator golf is fun to play. You want to watch other people play it? I guess we'll find out.
The other thing I'll say real quickly, in some made-for-TV events, they were always banking over the years. We've all seen them, of the interplay and the conversation. Remember in the Skins game between Tom Watson and whoever it is? That always let me down. It was bland. There was never anything it wasn't Charles Barkley. It was not interesting at all. And that's a big component. They think, boy, people are going to love this
Well,
stuff.
Lee Trevino was pretty good a few times.
Yeah,
No-
that's
no
one.
question.
Fred Funk was pretty good the one time he played, but yeah,
I have a
you're
picture
right.
of Lee Trevino after his
no
hole in
interplay.
one.
Well,
Well-
great job with the book of the year, as far as I'm concerned. Thanks,
Thank you again, Gary. It's been a lot of fun. It's doing well. Amazingly, the audio book, which I recorded and didn't think anything of, is going crazy because, again, Dinosaur doesn't understand how many, particularly young people, consume content now with podcast. I mean, with audiobooks. It's crazy.
Well, even people who are still actually going into an office to work can probably listen to part of it on the way in and on the way home and stuff like that. And I bet
maybe I should start recording my stories instead of writing them.
Gary, you have a book in you, my boy. I'm telling you,
you
have.
Yeah, but somebody already wrote it. It's called The Cat in the Hat, so I'm out.
Kathy, hold up that book again. That really good one.
Where did I put
Yeah.
it?
That's a good closing. She lost it. There it is. Rainmaker. I don't know if we stressed the title enough. Guarantee you'll enjoy reading it if you've ever heard of either Greg Norman or Tiger Woods. So get a copy or listen to it.
Couldn't be
Thanks
said better.
very much.
Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure. We could do another half an hour. See you soon.
We'll do this again and get your opinions on other stuff. How's that?
You know where to get me. I'm available.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.